Do you recognize that acronym, IoT? It stands for the Internet of Things, an interrelated system of computing devices that can transfer data across a network without human-to-human or human-to-computer interaction or even awareness. I first encountered this concept a couple of years ago when we hosted the National Conference on Children of Incarcerated Parents, and we equipped attendees with looped badges. You could meet someone, press the button on your looped badge, and exchange contact information without the ceremonial exchange of business cards. The information was stored somewhere in a cloud to be downloaded later. Further, when people entered the presentation room and left, their movement was recorded, and if they stayed for the whole session, a CEU certificate would be automatically generated. It's easy to think of different ways in our world that technology is influencing us. My coworker checks in on her cats with her nanny cam when she's at work. My son, who's an undergraduate, is working in a lab that's developing chips to be implanted in people's brains to treat things like dementia. They're called microimplantables. They're also working on a mesh that, when wrapped around your arm, can monitor your vital signs. They're called wearables. My husband in his company is working on a flying car, which he says will be available in the next 20 years. What's maybe most surprising is that most of these things were described decades earlier by technology visionaries. What's harder to visualize, at least for me, outside of online education, is how is technology changing social work, or how should technology be changing social work? This is something I've thought about for a long time, probably because of my association with these two fellows. On your left is the late Dr. Walter Hudson, creator of the Hudson Scales, and maybe best known for his controversial statement, "If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist." On the right is my former colleague and current collaborator, Dr. Walter Lamendala. He is one of the founders of the Human Services Information Technology Association in the 1980s. These are our visionaries of technology in social work, so impactful and so dear to me that I named my own son Walter. That's not a picture of my son in the middle. No, that's Wally from my favorite technology movie. In many ways, these two individuals represent very different approaches to technology. And my own scholarship in the area of child welfare represents the tension between these approaches. It reminds me a little bit of the poem by Robert Frost, A Road Not Taken. Child welfare is about as old as the profession of social work itself. It's disturbing that currently we hear child welfare described as an oppressive practice, and troublesome that there seems to be this intractable problem of racial disproportionality in child welfare. It's not just child welfare. If you look at health, education, income, corrections, you see differences in treatment by race and differences in outcome. Research on implicit racial bias tells us that wherever there is subjective decision-making, we're likely to see biased outcomes. In response, some systems have turned to predictive analytics. Early in my career, I thought that was where it was at. Analyze lots of data, see what variables come out as significant, put them in a predictive equation, and determine the likelihood of failure. And then try to get professionals to implement machine-generated decisions. Predictive analytics might be fine for research, but they're not so good in practice. All of those false positives have big impacts on people's lives. In fact, one of the most pressing critiques of predictive analytics today is that the tendency to conflate race and income perpetuate discrimination. My next journey into technology was really more by chance than design. The director of child welfare in our state wanted help to develop a simulation lab. He said that new social workers weren't prepared for the realities of practice, that when they went into people's homes, it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. And they were confusing cultural practices with child maltreatment. I was perplexed by this problem, not how to develop the simulation lab, but how to make it available across the state. I even thought about buying a truck and a trailer and driving around to the different offices. But luckily, our university encourages us to work across discipline. And so I went to a presentation by the Center for Games and Impact. That was it. We could develop a serious game that had a virtual home visit. And so Brianna's World was created, a game-based simulation. We worked hard to incorporate the Council on Social Work Education competencies and with the gaming technicians to make it look and feel as real as possible. In Brianna's World, the learner starts by creating an avatar, and then they're attached to that body throughout the game, and they act through the avatar. Research shows that people who embody avatars feel as though the avatar is performing their actions. It also shows that virtual reality contexts are able to stimulate empathy. In Brianna's World, there's 5 missions. The social worker starts by receiving a referral from a local school. Next, they meet with their supervisor and then conduct a home visit with a single mom and her 3 children. The mom is struggling financially, having recently lost her job because she was displaced by machine automation. The target of the referral, a 15-year-old girl, came to the attention of her teachers because her grades were falling, her behavior had changed, and she was expressing feelings of loss. After each mission, the learner evaluates their data, makes inferences, and organizes those in a strength-based framework. While playing, the instructor can monitor the student's progress, provide feedback, give them comments on their case notes, their inferences, and their final report. It's easy to jump to negative assumptions without data to support it, so the game represents an important learning moment. In my experience piloting the game with social work students, the students are very absorbed in the play no matter what their demographics. They make comments like, "I just had my first home visit," which shows how immersed they feel in the game. When they create an avatar, almost without exception, they create avatars in their own likeness. Some describe their feelings about playing the game as confident and energized, whereas others express frustration. Initially, I thought that was a bad thing that students felt frustrated playing the game. But I came to learn that their frustration was not about the game, it was about the ambiguity in social work practice. Was Frank the neighbor a good guy or a bad guy that was out to exploit Brianna? Should they tell the mom about Brianna's secret cell phone? Should they make a report to the child abuse hotline? Social work is hard, should be frustrating. Game-based simulations are powerful tools like the home visits themselves, except in an environment where it is safe to express inferences that reflect bias and at times even racism, and to dialogue and to get feedback. It's an important learning tool. There are a number of areas that technology will inform social work. I have only briefly addressed two of them. One, predictive analytics, which seeks to reduce control and decision-making, and the other, the game-based simulation, which seeks to promote professional capabilities and enhance critical thinking. The future of technology in social work should not be dominated by the spatial geometries of the IoT, but instead by the human experience of Earth and other and choice. The game-based simulation presents an opportunity for anti-oppressive practice. One's need to comfort is evoked as their avatar looks through that doorway of the apartment at a mother who's exhausted with the fullness of life, having recently lost her job to machine automation, and yet at that time sleeping with a device central to predictive algorithms, her cell phone in her hand. Surely that is an IoT moment worth considering. And so, in closing, the words of Robert Frost. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you.